So I have in my hands here a bottle of Château Mouton Rothschild 2004. If you're a wine lover, you may well have come across Mouton Rothschild by name. Possibly you might have drunk it if you're lucky enough. It's one of those great and rare wines of Bordeaux, and one of those wines that so many wine collectors seek from year after year, and that many other people only dream of drinking. So it's on board Emirates Airline in first class only, of course, for a limited period of time. And this is the first vintage of Mouton Rothschild that has ever been put on board by Emirates, so somewhat of a celebration. You might note from my accent that I am in fact British, and this is quite an interesting wine to start with because the label on this particular wine was designed by Prince Charles, the future King of England, or heir to the throne, I think we say, and it was in celebration of the Entente Cordiale, which is between the French and the British. So quite fascinating piece of history there. So the rich history of Mouton Rothschild dates back to the 1850s when the Baron Nathaniel de Rothschild purchased the property. At that time there was a classification, and Mouton Rothschild was designated one of the second growths, so one of the flight of 15 wines that were second best in the region of the Medoc in Bordeaux, where you find Mouton Rothschild. Slightly disappointed, Baron Nathaniel thought that Mouton should have been one of the first growths, along with Lafite Rothschild, along with Château Latour and Château Margaux and Aubryon further south. So cut to the 1920s, it was Baron Philippe who took over the property when he was only around 20 years old, and it became his goal to take Château Mouton Rothschild to first growth status, where he believed the wine rightly belonged. And he was somewhat of an innovator in Bordeaux at that time, and the first thing he did was to take back control of the bottling of the wines into the chateau itself, which was an unusual practice at the time in Bordeaux. Most of the famous wines in Bordeaux were sold to merchants in barrels, shipped to places like the Netherlands and Britain, and bottled under the control of the merchants and the traders. So by doing this, Mouton became very well known for its quality at that time. Another great move that the Baron Philippe made in 1924 was to invite an artist, a famous artist of the time, to come and design one of his labels. What you find now is that the labels change every year and have done since 1945, and there is a new artist commissioned every year with a particular project or a particular idea in mind, and this is sort of almost like the calling card of Mouton Rothschild, because it is the only property in Bordeaux that has this evolving label from year to year. It isn't all about the label for Mouton Rothschild. Really, the essence of what makes Mouton Rothschild great is in the vineyard itself. Mouton sits in the commune of Pauillac, which I think we could call the most famous commune of the Medoc region of Bordeaux, possibly one of the most famous regions of the world. Characterized by its deep gravel soils, which are excellent for Cabernet Sauvignon because they provide the perfect amount of drainage. And what it's doing really is the well-drained soils are encouraging the roots to dig down and find the nutrients and find the water in the soil. And the more the root system of the vines develops, the more complex and intense the wines become. And intensity really is a mark of Pauillac. You find that the wines of Pauillac are both muscular, intense in flavour, they have a strong structure, there's plenty of tannins there that age the wines over years and in most cases decades. And they do sit among the finest wines of the world as a result. So if you're doing a tour of Bordeaux and you wanted to find the best vineyards, more likely you'd find that the highest points in any of the given communes would be the areas that produce the best wines. And that's where you find Mouton. It's on what we call the Mouton Plateau, which is the highest point of the Pauillac region. So I'm going to open the Mouton now, give it a little taste, and let you know what you're in for. This wine will be going on board sometime after April 2020. That's what we anticipate at the moment. It should be on board for a few months, and it's going to go on the routes to the UK and the Americas. So if you happen to be travelling to either of those at that point, do look out for this because it is It is one of the greatest wines of the world, and it would be phenomenal to be able to taste it. I'm opening it now and then giving it a little bit of time to breathe, which is what I recommend for all of these big wines that we've got on board. Allowing the wines to breathe brings out so much more. It brings out the complexity in the wine, and it does that through allowing the oxygen to bring out the aromatics of the wines. So on the subject of the labels for Mouton Rothschild, there are over 70 different labels that have been commissioned now. And if you're interested, you can book an appointment at the Château and go into the label museum, where you find the prints of all of the labels with descriptions of why the artist came up with the particular style of painting and what was the thought behind it. If you can't get over to Bordeaux and you are traveling through Dubai Airport, the fine wine and luxury spirits store Le Clos does have its own vertical of Mouton Rothschild. It doesn't have all 70 labels, but it does have quite a number of those. I think it's around 30 of different vintages that comprise the vertical itself. So as with all the wines of the Emirates vintage collection, it just takes a little bit of time to open up, which is why we're given an extra hour on the decanter. Of course, something that you can do on board, first class in particular. And there's no rush with a wine like this. It's just going to keep evolving in the glass. And it's got so much on the nose already. It's such intense black fruits. That hallmark sort of cassis or blackcurrant that you get in Pauillac. But there's so much more. There's notes of cedar. There's a slight sort of tobacco or cigar box note to it. And that exuberance that you find in Mouton Rothschild in particular, above all the other wines. It's got such a brilliant harmony. It's difficult to pick out what's so great about a wine like this, but the balance and the harmony of the fruit, the acidity, and the tannins is really the most important thing. You hardly feel that the tannins in this wine at 15, 16 years old, and they've really started to soften out and create even more harmony in the wine. Such a joy to drink. So I don't think you can have any trouble enjoying this wine, whatever you're drinking it with. My personal preference is for a wine like this to have some red meat. It breaks down the tannins in the wine, and the wine breaks down the proteins in the meat. It just creates another level of harmony. And the finish is so long, it just keeps going and going. And behind the fruit, you've got this beautiful sense of minerality, of structure, which is creating this beautiful tension in the wine. It really is a wine that I just like to sit here sipping for a couple of hours, which is something, of course, that you potentially will have the opportunity to do. So you can expect to see this wine on board the routes going to the UK and the Americas sometime early in 2020. The wine's going to be absolutely brilliant by that stage, and I'm sure it will provide a lot of enjoyment to whoever does pick this wine off the wine list. If I was traveling, that would certainly be my first choice of red, as I'm sure it will be for a lot of you. Cheers.